Hi guys, it's Kelly Latevola here, and I'm back with another video for Simon Says Stamp. Today we're going to be doing, well, lots of things really. We're throwing everything at this card but the kitchen sink. We are going to be using the new stained glass greetings, both the dies and the stamps, the Poinsettia stamp set, and then the Let Us Rejoice. Those are both the poinsettias, I think, from last year. But I wanted to switch it up a little bit. I like getting more to my stamps. I know you guys do too. So what I've done is I've stamped the Rejoice floral bouquet on some Eclipse masking paper, and then I cut that into 3 pieces. Well, 2 originally, and then I realized I wanted to cut the stems off. So I cut the leaves apart and I cut the stems off. When you're doing this part of it, make sure that you're cutting on the outside edge. So basically what you want is you want that black part removed that's going to be in between like the florals and the leaves, because otherwise it won't stamp. You'll be masking that part too. So you just want to make sure that you're cutting really, really close to the white area. So I put all that down and I had previously matched my stamp up, and then I'm going to remove the floral part of the mask. So I'm stamping in Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink because we're going to be doing some Copic coloring. And then this is going to be able, basically what we're going to be able to do is just kind of recreate our bouquet into a different type of floral image. So I didn't get a great impression the first time around, so I stamped it again. This is the joy of owning a Misty, folks, is you can just stamp it again. And this time I actually got up off my tushy and, you know, did the Sherry Carroll CPR method and really pushed it down, and I got a really good impression. So then from there, I'm going to remove the other stamps, or the other masks, and you'll see that some of the areas didn't stamp. That's because I didn't get close enough to that white part. That's why I'm telling you, so you don't make the same mistakes I did. Then I'm going to put that mask back in place because I loved that beautiful leaf and pine needle with the berries. So I just tore off a piece of that Eclipse masking paper, and I'm masking the bottom part of my card. Now remember, the flowers were already masked, and then I'm just going to stamp the leaf part of it. So I did still use it, I just used it in a different position so that I could, again, create something that was a little bit of a different image. I learned the first time around, so I did the CPR method again, and then I am going to remove it from the Misty for the rest of this. I'm going to mask those leaves, so it's all cut out, so I still have all 3 of those masks if I need them. I'm going to mask them so I can add in the poinsettias from that other stamp set. So I'm still stamping in Intense Black ink from Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to stamp 2 of these poinsettias, and then I'm also going to add in some leaves from the poinsettia stamp set. There's like 3 different size leaves. I'm going to add in a couple of those. And then I did take it back to the Misty one more time just to get a few more of those leaves and pine needles. So again, just, you know, we're just trying to switch it up. I did 2 of these. I only showed you 1 just so you could get the idea of it. This is me removing all of the masks so you can see what the entire image looks like now that we have completed all of the stamping. That Eclipse masking paper sticks really good. So I had just a little bit of an issue. Here you can see those areas where I didn't stamp before. I'm going to go in with an EK Success writing pen. This is Copic safe. You can also use a Micron or a Copic multi-liner, just as long as it's Copic safe if you're doing it beforehand, which I find that easier to do. And I'm just going to fill in those areas where I know that those petals belong. So here are both of the ones that I did. The one on the left, I stamped it with the stems intact. Then I masked the dahlia portion of it. I stamped the other 2 poinsettias to kind of bulk up that bouquet. Then I masked those and then went back in with the original leaf arrangement. I also added more leaves to that. And because I told you we're doing so many things to these cards. So now I'm just going to add a very light Distress Oxide background. For the one that you watched me stamp, I did Cracked Pistachio, and then for this one, I'm going to do Antique Linen. I just really wanted to show you how versatile this can be. So the reason that I did 2 cards, even though I'm not going to show you all of the coloring and everything for all of them, I wanted to show you that it can be used for Christmas, which is what I'm going to use it for the holiday season. But then it can also be used for just a regular, you know, sending a loving card or encouraging card to a friend. So here I'm with the Copic coloring, I like to start with my lightest color, and I'm going to show you all of this, even though this flower is very large. The reason I'm going to show you all of this is because when I go in with my lightest color, I'm laying in my shadows. So that way, if you decide that you want to color this at home, if you own the stamp set or purchase it in the future, you will be able to see where I think the shadows should go. Now you should know that it's where I think they should go. Typically when you are coloring, because of the way this dahlia is drawn, there's a lot of leaves folding over, and this can be very overwhelming for people who aren't super comfortable with coloring, but it doesn't need to be. So a couple of things to note. Where an object meets another object, two petals meet, typically you're going to add some shading. Where one folds over the other, so where you have those lighter edges, there's going to be shading there because you have an object again on top of another object. As I move out to my darkest color, I'm adding less color because some of these, the way the petals are folded up, it's more narrow at the point of the petal, so the shadows would not be as deep. Whereas where they come together in the center, again, where they meet, it's going to be a lot darker. If you find that you are struggling with adding 4 colors, or that you are struggling with adding really a lot of the shading, skip the YR21. Skip that portion of it, because the more ink you put down, the more likely it is to bleed out. And it's not necessary. You can make it work without that, and then it will help you to conserve that highlight. You can see even on those teeny tiny petals in the center, I'm still trying to conserve that highlight. So I work out from my lightest to my darkest, darkest back into my lightest, and that's what you can see me doing now. If for some reason you feel like it's getting too dark, or that you're nervous about the coloring or the bleeding, then don't add as much shading. It's totally going to be fine. Nobody is going to look at your card and be like, oh my god, did you see that that those 2 petals met and she didn't even add any shading? I mean, how could she even mail out a card like this? Nobody's going to do that. So it's still going to be pretty. Just do what you're comfortable with. So here, this is the lightest color. I just went over everything, all of it, with all of it. And it did lift up, because if you put a lighter color over a darker color, it can lift some of the pigment. To just make sure my shadows were really nice and contrasting, I just went back in with the darkest color and added just little bits where I thought it should be. I colored the rest of the dahlias in that same kind of golden yellow color, and then we're going to move on to the poinsettias. This is how I like to color any kind of large bloom. This is just me. So first things first, we talked about how anytime something lays on top of something else, there's going to be shadows. So just to make sure we don't forget it, I'm just going to go in and outline it. Just right out the gate. I'm just going to add in that area where I know it's going to be shadowed. For larger blooms, to make them more round, to make them more three-dimensional, if you add color to the base and color to the tip, leave the highlight in the center, that's what's going to help make them look more round. So it doesn't matter what type of flower it is, if it's a large bloom, period. This is how I like to color them. So I'm using just the tip of my marker and a light flicking motion, and I'm adding that flicking from the edges toward the center and from the bottom toward the center. So you want to make sure you're leaving white area in between. Your 2 areas at this point should not be touching one another. They should just be white in between. And yes, it's going to look funny right now, but just trust me, because by the time we're done with it, it will not look funny. It will look beautiful. So again, I'm just going through, starting with that lightest color, working out to my darkest. One of the things that I will encourage you to try to do is vary your strokes. And what I mean by that is your strokes should not always be the same length. You can see in the center there where they are kind of all the same length, and it's what I call a wall of color. In real life, things don't look like that. They aren't just solid blocked in color. I apologize for whatever my camera was doing there. It's getting a little, I think I'm moving too fast. I got like flash hands and it doesn't like it. but that wall of color, that's not really how things look. So I have a tendency to focus on it kind of like the second time through, of making sure that my strokes are varied, but it's just something that's really good to get in the habit of. So some should be short, some should be long, some should be in between, just so that you have a good contrast, so it looks more organic, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So now I'm going in with my darkest color, and I will not try to kid you, the R59 is dark, but if you want something to look dimensional, you have to go, there has to be contrast. No risk, no reward, folks. Go big or go home. Like, just try to do it on an image you just stamp. Not something where you've spent a ton of time, like this is, you know, ton of masking. We've distress inked it. This is now the 4th flower I'm coloring on here. Just stamp out a single flower and try it. Try to add in that dark. Don't be super heavy-handed with it. Because you can't, well, I shouldn't say you can't take it away, because God loves a colorless blender. You can take it away a little bit, but just try just to add a little bit, because even if you don't add as much as I do or as much as other colorists do, even just adding a teeny tiny bit will really help you to build that contrast, and then the more you use it, the more comfortable you get. So now here we're going back through out to the lightest color. Here's where I'm really trying to make sure I'm varying the strokes, that I'm not getting that wall of color, and I'm starting to close that gap on my white highlight. Some people like to do a really strong white highlight, which can look super cool. So if that's your style, like, embrace what you want to do. I prefer a more subtle highlight, so I'm going to color in more of that white area. Neither way is wrong. It just depends on what your own personal preference is. Out to the lightest color, and this is going to seem like really super fast, because when I do the lightest color, I don't even like go from the tip to the base. I just like go kind of in the middle and just do a bunch of little flicks back and forth. Once I was happy with that, I colored in the center with the same gold colors that I used for the dahlia, and then we're moving on to the leaves. So this YG90 family, one of my favorite color combinations for Christmas time cards. It's a desaturated yellow green, but still really beautiful. For this particular leaf, I'm really only just adding shading from the inside toward the outside. So I'm still adding shadows around the flower, because that makes sense. It's sitting on top of it. These leaves are tucked behind. And then I'm just going to work out back to the lightest color. For the lightest color, I like to kind of bring it in from the outside edge, just so I don't lift up too much of that darkness. For the pine needles, I decided to go with some blue greens. Again, these are very desaturated. You can tell by the numbers. We're in the 70 families. There's a lot of gray in these. But I thought it was a good color variation to that yellow green. And I wanted them to look like pine needles. That's what they're drawn as. And this is not solid color at all. This is all just the straight flicking motion with the tip of the marker. Sometimes I'm not even landing in the center when I begin my stroke, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. But it just gives it kind of a really natural look, because you have some of that antique linen peeking through. And also make sure that you're taking the strokes, some of them out past where the lines are drawn, so it's really filling in that area. I was kind of torn for these poinsettia leaves, because poinsettia leaves are typically more on the, well, like pine needles, like distressing pine needle side, so more blue based. But I didn't want to go too blue based, because I already had done those pine needles in the blue green. So I decided I was just going to go for straight G family, and the lightest color almost looks kind of like that cracked pistachio. One of the things that I like to do with these these leaves, or any leaves that have like that indent, is to accent the indent. It's going to help give a lot of texture to your leaves. So you'll see me adding little triangles to anywhere it's indented. You can also kind of make up your own little indentations. That's totally fine, to give another leaf. These are drawn very textured. But if you have another stamp set that has leaves that are not, you can create those indentations by doing just your shading. So once I had all of the colors done, I went over it one time with the lightest color, and now we are done with the Copic coloring. So I am gonna just go in with my white gel pen. I added some white highlights to the berries. I should note I did go over those with the darker red, even though they stamp black, because Simon Says Stamp ink is Copic friendly. They'll kind of intermingle together and become a really dark red. I outline all of my images with a Copic safe pen. That's just how I roll. Those you saw very quickly, both of them colored up, and then we're going to move on to the sentiment. Now, we've done all this Copic coloring, and there's going to be a few you are like, you're out of your mind. You're going to stamp right over this flower. I am a little bit out of my mind, and don't worry, you're going to think it again before the card's over. But it's all right. This is a trust me moment. So I want to white heat emboss this over my flowers. So I'm using an embossing buddy to just pick up any of the static. Then I'm going to stamp this. I mean, these greetings, these little sentiments are just so beautiful, the stained glass sentiments. And so it's going to say joy and peace. And I'm going to stamp that in Versamark ink right over top. And then once I'm sure that I got a good impression, I'm going to sprinkle on some Simon Says Stamp white embossing powder, and I'm going to heat set it. This, I've said before, I really like to keep the heat gun already heating up before I bring it to my card, because I'm trying to minimize that warping. So if you have some place that you can set it and let it run safely, I would do that before you even bring it to your card. Once I was happy with that, those are dies. Yes, they are. So I'm going to die cut right through my colored panel. Again, you're going to think I'm a little bit crazy, but it really adds some texture and kind of gives a cool effect. So I'm using my Teflon Bold folder to go ahead and fold down a white card base. I'm using Tombow multi-glue to adhere the main portion of the panel to the card. This is just going down flat with the Tombow multi-glue. Gotta line that up. And I will tell you that when I die cut this, the joy, the little Y, has just like a teeny tiny little piece, but you didn't even notice it was missing. And that was one of the reasons why I really like doing this technique with this particular stamp and die set, is because you don't have to hunt down all of these little intricate pieces. They are relatively large, so there isn't anything to hunt down. They all just cut out together. So I put some Scotch foam tape on the back of the each one of these, but this is the joy, and then I'm fitting it back in like a puzzle piece. And I did this for all of them, for the and for the piece. So the picture is back together again, but the sentiment is popped out from it. I also, from that same set, heat embossed a little label that says "Sending You," with the same white heat embossing. I'm using just a little teeny tiny piece of Scotch foam tape on the one end, really just as a stabilizer. And then I'm going to put Tombow multi-glue on the other part, because that joy is already popped up and this will put them on an even level. I did the same thing for the other card. I'm going to add some clear Wink of Stella. The other one says sending you, wait, what does it say? Sending love and hope. So I did it the same way. You can see I have some clear sequins on here. I really only use clear sequins. But I like to use them as a placeholder for my Nouveau drops, because a lot of times with the Nouveau drops, I have no idea where to put them. And so this just lets me kind of set everything up before I add it. And that was just another way to tie in the white. So that's both cards. I hope that you guys will give at least something here that you've seen a try and are inspired to create. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye.